I went back down to Memphis to visit my grandmother, and apropos of nothing, she asked me, well, have you seen Papa's cheese? I was like, no, I don't exactly know what you're talking about. So she goes off and she brings back this envelope that says Papa's cheese, and in it is an object about the size of my hand wrapped in crumpled up aluminum foil. And she unwraps it and she shows me this thing that looks like a pumice stone. And it's actually kind of the color of the walls in here. And she said, well, this is Papa's cheese. And it turns out this is a wedge of cheese that originated in Lithuania. And sometime around 1893, when my great-grandfather was around 14 years old, his parents sent him away from the shtetl to avoid conscription in the Tsar's army, as they had sent away other children. And they sent him to live with uncles in South Africa. And they sent him away with the trunk of his belongings and this wedge of cheese that his mother had made for him. He did not eat this cheese on the journey from Lithuania to Johannesburg. He didn't throw it away. He stayed in Johannesburg, I think, for about 10 years. He fought in the Boer Wars on the side of the Dutch. The Dutch lost. He left, and as my aunt proudly states, he left with a first-class ticket to Leeds in England, and then came to the United States. And wound up in Memphis, Tennessee, still with the cheese in his possession, got married to a woman named Clare. They had 4 daughters, one of whom was my grandmother. When my great-grandfather passed away, he gave the cheese to my grandmother. And my dad didn't know about the cheese until 1970 or 1971, after he and my mom got married. And my mom was talking about wanting an old trunk to refurbish. And my grandmother said, oh, Bunny, you can take my trunk, go up in the attic and check it out. And she opened it up, and the top tray in the trunk, there was a tooth in it, and this strange object wrapped in falling apart cheesecloth. And she brings it down, and she's like, Josie, you probably want this, right? I mean, I don't know what it is. She said, oh yes, absolutely, Papa's cheese. You can take the trunk, but leave me with the cheese. Anyway, and I found out about it and was transfixed by the cheese, by the idea of the cheese. You know, it's this incredible artifact just on its own. It's, at this point, I think 118 years old. That it survived this long, that my great-grandfather decided to keep it, that my grandmother decided to keep it. And so it's this, again, just on its own, standalone, it's this crazy artifact. It's a 118-year-old wedge of cheese, and it's clearly Jewish cheese. So when I heard about this fellowship, I thought, I want to make an album like the cheese that can stand on its own as a piece of art that people can appreciate regardless of their heritage, but is clearly at its foundation Jewish. The first year, I received a fellowship, and there were 12 artists, 4 musicians, 4 performing artists, and 4 visual artists. And the idea was to encourage emerging artists to work with projects with a Jewish theme or with Jewish content. I think that the cheese was definitely a selling point in getting me the grant. Originally it was just sort of a vague, I thought it was fairly vague, notion that I would sort of take my experiences as a Jewish woman that grew up in the South, that moved to the North, and write songs that sort of express that journey and that identity. I used a chunk of the money within a couple of months of receiving it to go to Eastern Europe. I'd spent 2 years living in Germany, and I didn't feel like I'd really explored the Eastern European side. Of course, I'd spent this time at the Yiddish Book Center, which definitely gave me a great foundation, but I felt like I need to go to Eastern Europe and do the same sort of experiential research that I'd done when I was in Germany. So I planned a trip that was 2 weeks long, starting out in Kiev, and I planned to take a side trip to Berdichev, which is where my maternal grandmother's mother was from. And then I went to Lithuania, went to Vilna, which apparently people call Vilnius now, which I think is ridiculous. Anyway, went to Vilna and really wanted to find the home of the cheese. My grandmother had told me in an interview that I did with her, I also did one with my other grandmother, that her father was from Pushville, which does not sound very Lithuanian, also does not sound very Yiddish. I Googled Pushville. I think there's a Pushville in Indiana. But so I was like, ugh, all I know is that it's in Kovna Gubernia. I'll go to Kovna. But while I was in Vilna, I went to a museum there, and they had a map of all of the, I think all of the shtetls in Lithuania and their Yiddish names. And I asked somebody, an older woman who worked there, if she'd ever heard of anything called Pushville or Possville or anything, Possaville. She was like, oh, Possville. So I took a bus to Possville. And it turns out that the main industry of Possville is cheese.